You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am Brian Call. I've got Brad Hunt here beside me, and today our guest is Cliff Gray. So Cliff and I got on a call, and we did a little podcast together. For those that don't know who Cliff Gray is, he has an excellent YouTube channel, podcast, where he basically talks heavily about elk hunting, but he just covers hunting in general.
And I would say there's, between the social and the YouTube, he has a lot of educational stuff, pointers, tips, stuff that's going to just help everybody.
Yep.
He's really good about education.
He is one of so there's a lot of hunting podcasts out there.
Mm-hmm.
Admittedly, I don't tune into a lot of them at this stage of my
I listen
life.
to a lot of podcasts that I have to edit all the time. So
Cliff Gray is one of the channels I hit and watch regularly. So big fan of Cliff. It was a pleasure and an honor to have him on the show. Love the guy, super articulate. He's done an episode or two with Joe Rogan.
With Rogan.
And I just love his thoughtful approach to things, how he articulates his ideas. On this episode, I just kind of interviewed him like I would selfishly have a conversation with him if we were just hanging out on the couch, in a cabin or something. I didn't prepare like, here's how to hunt elk and what's in your pack or that kind of thing. We just sort of hung out. I'm not prepping you for any sort of topical. We just kind of covered a lot of things. We're going to get together again because I have so many more questions that are more subject oriented about maybe the backcountry, about hunting, about gear, elk behavior, scouting, all that kind of stuff. But this episode's sort of more of an introduction of who Cliff Gray is, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. We have an elk tour that is coming your way. If you're interested in joining us, it's like a 2-day seminar.
Day and a half, basically. So it's myself, Brian, Ryan Lampers, and the man, Mark Livesay himself. July 13th and 14th, Meridian, Idaho, at the New Shields. For more information, just go to treelineacademy.net. Everything's there. Has the agenda for the whole tour and everything like that. So
if you want to sign up, go to treelineacademy.net. You'll find it there. It's invaluable, the lessons and the information you can learn there, and just it'll shorten your learning curve so quickly.
Spots are limited. It's filling up pretty fast.
We plan to do more, but we just threw this together last second. So trying to fit it in with our busy schedules. Ryan's at the Western Hunting Summit right now, and last week we were there with him. So there's a lot going on for him, but we squeezed this in between a bunch of stuff so we could just roll this. Shields was gracious, gave us the facility to do it in. They have a great location and a great little place to do it in. So go sign up at treelineacademy.net, not .com, .net, and hopefully we'll see you there. And if you have a comment or you want us to answer a question, hit us up in the comment section of our YouTube and Rumble videos. That's where we spend most of our time. We're pretty diligent about reviewing all the comments that come through those channels and getting back to you. That's where you're going to get us. Don't email us very often, or
we're not great on social.
Social DMing.
We try. But
it's a lot. That's rough. So check us out there. All right. Hope you enjoy the show. Stay gritty. All right, folks. Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm Brian Call. I've got Cliff Gray here. Cliff and I are having a little conversation outside of the podcast, but it's time to hit record. We need to get into some topics here and share it with the public. So anyway, we were just talking about gear. I'm going to dive right into this discussion that we're talking about. And then when we get through that, I'm going to go back for people who don't know who you are, get a little bit of your backstory. But let's get into this gear real quick. We're both basically having a conversation about how, it's curious how the gear out on the market is being developed. And you'll see companies come out with stuff, and you were lamenting earlier about how you've used a bunch of gear, some things that would make it better. And then when you bring that proposal to a company, they're not really responding or taking your advice, right? Hey, if you like our show and you want to support us, you can head over to Canvas Cutter. They sell these awesome bed rolls that we've been using for years. You can just throw these suckers out on the ground, camp in them. You see I got my sleeping bag inside. Can't recommend them enough. They also have duffel bags, some of the best You've seen canvas duffel bags. They've got beanbag chairs as well. They call them the dirt bag. They got wall tents. Head on over there. Use the code GRITTY. Check it out. Cannot recommend the bedrolls enough. Let's get back to the show.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, everybody's polite about it, but you see the results. You know what I mean? A year later, it's still the same. You know,
and I think, listening, like you made a comment like, are you really entitled to? Does it sound arrogant for you to be like, look, I think you should change this? You almost feel a little bit arrogant, like suggesting that.
Sure.
But I don't think that's arrogant at all. I think that maybe that's not the word to use, but basically you're living out there and doing your hunts more than most. Your experience level when it comes to like elk hunting, it's so far beyond the average guy that your understanding of the equipment needed, the gear, and the reality of living out there the way that you do, you understand it in a way that very few do. It's just truth.
Sure.
I look at how many days that Lampers and I spend outside and backpack and hunt and do the things we do. We just have an experience that you cannot replace by conjecture.
Yeah, no, totally. And particularly within like certain niches, like we were talking about it, Brian, like you guys are doing long duration stuff.
10 or 15 days in a row. Mm-hmm.
Which in the spectrum of the hunting world, there's not a lot of guys that do a whole lot of that every season. Like there might be some guys out there that do it once a season.
Right.
I mean, I would say that, if a guy's going on a 15-day backpack hunt once a year, he's like on the spectrum of hunters. He's pretty hardcore. Right. You know what I mean? So you guys are doing it multiple times. So
yeah, we're typically doing, 20 to 30 days during spring for bear.
Right.
And we're doing at least, 20, 30 days for elk. We're doing another 20, 30 days for mule deer. And then we're doing some Mexico mule deer or Coues deer and maybe New Zealand. And so by the time you're done, and then Ryan does more than me. He does even more than that. Like he's multiple mule deers hunts at those rates. And so 150 days, 100 to 150 days each is pretty average for us. And they're not just like 5-day trips, there's 10 to 15 day intervals. And when you do that, I think the experience that you get with your sleeping bag, your glassing pad, your tent, your shelter, your stove, under all the conditions that a person might encounter from the early summer dates to, the mosquito infested Alaska to, super cold Wyoming, Montana, late season mule deer, steep mountains, all of those things, the tick infested bear season, like they all present different challenges. And it's in that school that you learn about gear and live it in a way that other people do not. And so I think it's just one of those things where companies out there producing gear don't know what they don't know.
I got you. Sure.
They just don't. They think they know. They think they know because they go out, like you said, quite a bit. And so they design something in a boardroom. They use it in September elk and they go, we got it. We got it. And it's like, no, that fabric at 0 degrees is not working the same as it is in the summer. Right. The rain in Alaska isn't the same as the snow in Colorado. And they don't know because they haven't actually done it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. No, I think that's probably a big part of it, Brian, is it's just like you say, they've used it maybe in like a subset of what they're selling the product for. I think that is all that happens all the time.
You'll see guys, I get this all the time because I'll use 5 different backpacks. I'll use 5 different teepees and shelters and stuff. I'll use 5 different bows. Lately, I've been shooting multiple bows and people are like, oh, you're just jumping from sponsor to sponsor, from bow to, I'm like, I'm not sponsored. Like, I'm just using bows, guys, But people are so quick to to judge you.
Oh,
but
judge you on it. It's funny you say that because as I've made this foray into like a little, I guess, a broader exposure in social media, I'm very, I'm always worried about that being judged by like changing something. And I will say like my philosophy on it always has been, Brian, I think this comes from I thought about this a lot lately, and I think it comes from my years of guiding. And I'm sure you can relate just given how much time you spend out there, but I'm always hesitant to change something permanently in my gear, not necessarily because there's not better products. I just historically haven't had like the time to like integrate it and test it. And what's weird is that now I have a little bit more of that flexibility, but I'm still kind of hesitant to do it. And it's weird because I'll put up a YouTube video on some gear that I use, and like I've had it happen probably a dozen times. Somebody will mention some like new iteration of that or some replacement thing, and I like look at it, I get it, I try it. I'm like, yeah, it is better. You know what I mean? But I've been very hesitant over the years to like test new things, really from a practical standpoint, because I hate being up. Like if I'm going from hunt to hunt to hunt, I hate like, okay, I just finished guiding this mountain goat hunt in Colorado. Now I'm going to do a sheep hunt. And so, but it's going to be a little bit longer. Okay, somebody sent me this piece of gear to try or whatever. I'm not going to take, the old stereo pin I use and take it out and then put a new filter in and then go on that hunt. Because now like it's just too risky for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think I've been really sticky because of that, but now that I have more social media exposure, I constantly like, oh man, now if I do test stuff, I almost have to like over test it before I expose it because I feel like I'm going to be judged on it.
But I agree. I know what you're talking about, but I look at people look at Joe Rogan and doing his podcast.
Yeah.
People will say, Joe, you can't just talk about the pandemic like that.
Right.
You can't just like riff about maybe this dewormer works or maybe that. You can't just talk. You have to be an expert, thoroughly dive into it and then know it backwards and forward because you're so influential. And if you open your mouth, someone might just go out and grab this at the horse store and inject themselves. It's like this this thing where if you're going to talk about anything publicly, you better have tested it to the gills, and you really shouldn't have these conversations, just open conversations like you would with your friends. I look at my show and it's like this. I'm having conversations with buddies and friends, and you get to listen in. That's it.
Sure.
That's it. So I'll talk about whatever the hell I want. And if I go and grab like 3 pieces of gear and I haven't thoroughly tested them, I'll get lambasted. Someone will say, dude, that thing's a piece of junk. I can't even believe you gave it the time of day or even mentioned it on your podcast. And I'm like, well, that's how I figure out it's a piece of junk. Like, I'm just being me and you're a fly on the wall. And I think I've ridden through the flames long enough that the audience is distilled now to a point where they're like, I just shot different arrows, different broadheads, different bows over the last few weeks. And the impression is most people are like, he's just trying stuff. It's cool.
Yeah.
And then there are people like that just hate your guts because they feel like you just misinformed the public and you just, it was a travesty what you just did. And you have no business talking about this subject.
Yeah. Which is kind of, it can be kind of hilarious, Brian, because I think probably in your content, I know in my content, I like if I just wear something, I don't view it as an endorsement, but a lot of people do. And it's like, I get these comments like, oh, look, like Cliff's like, I like the Origin stuff. I like the guys that sent me stuff. I like trying their stuff. There's aspects of it I like. And for a set of videos, I was wearing it a lot, right? And then all of a sudden, one video I'm wearing something else, and it's like, oh, Cliff, do you still like Origin? It's like, no, dude, I just changed my clothes.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that, and I got a watch. I've been wearing a watch for like 3 months, but I just did a few podcasts and people are like, Brian Call's wearing a watch. I haven't worn a watch in like 3 or 4 years. That's true. But the fact, I'm just shocked that people noticed that I don't wear a watch and now I have worn a watch.
Yeah, yeah.
I would never have thought anyone would be paying enough attention to notice that.
Yeah.
But
well,
they do.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brian.
No, and it's kind of, again, it's like one of those things where I realize, okay, people are listening and there's a lot of people that listen. And so I understand the sentiment that they don't want you to, you're being watched. So be careful. But I can't operate that way. I have to be real, just say what I think, not really worry about it. I have to feel like I'm talking to a bunch of buddies and nobody else is listening, to have an authentic and real podcast, real conversation. And so I kind of am like, I kind of model it after Joe, where he talks to all kinds of people. Joe's not a doctor.
No. Yeah.
He doesn't care. He still has guys on that have completely different opinions or that are sharing information. And he's like, sometimes he'll do a podcast where he's completely wrong. Sure. And he has a guest on, and that guest, like, I remember when they had the Twitter CEO on there talking about censorship, and Joe's like, oh yeah, it makes total sense. Okay, I get it. And totally like validated their censorship. And he got just attacked, which is fine, rightly so. Like,
yeah, sure.
You know, then they come back with a new guest that counters, because Joe didn't have the expertise on it. He just given the space for the conversation. Dude, I think that's how we all grow and learn. It's through open conversations. People are wrong. You reevaluate more conversations. You reevaluate more conversations. And so I kind of just ignore what I hear. I don't look at comments very often, except on YouTube. I try to respond there, but it's social media. I could care less. I mean, I'm barely on there at all. Barely on there at all. I don't give a crap about Instagram or Facebook. I don't leverage it at all. I don't really use it. I don't find it as, just don't care about it.
Yeah. That's interesting, man. Do you think it's because I have kind of migrated that way a little bit too, Brian? I actually find that in my YouTube comments there's actually kind of a little bit of a community. I don't know if you have that.
When we do our films and I drop them, I try to do giveaways. So if you leave a comment, we're going to randomly select a comment and give you a rangefinder next week or something like that. I wanted to encourage a community in the comment section. So when we drop a film, we'll get 1,000 comments, and I try to respond to every comment that gets left in a movie we drop. And in my experience, that's where I'm trying to foster a community. Social media, it's garbage. It's mostly rage content. Rage gets far more clicks than in ranting than does positivity.
Sure.
It's viral. Someone can clip something out of context and just share it. You always get people who will jump on there and they can easily hate on something you just said without really doing any digging, research, or getting more context. Look, if I do a complex or deep topic on YouTube and Apple and Spotify through the audio version of the podcast, and I put that out to the public, the audience that consumes that is a more thoughtful, deep, an audience interested in learning, growing, seeing what I have to say in others. That audience is real, Right. If I take the same clip from that podcast and I put it up onto Instagram, I can get 1,000 people angry at me in 2 seconds, and then trying to cancel me with various friends and partners, But I could do the same exact stuff in long form content on a podcast or a YouTube video, and I don't get any. Nobody says anything but positive, constructive interactions. But what's interesting is when it comes to sponsorships, if you're a brand, which I don't really pursue sponsorships, they do mostly discount code stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And I'll be able to promote like Stealthy Hunter supplements and Mountain Op supplements at the same time, because there's some I like over here and some I like over there. And if you buy the ones I recommend and use my code, you get paid. I get paid. You get a discount. So it gives me the ultimate level of freedom. It's less because a lot of exclusivity agreements and sponsorship agreements, if you only use all of our stuff, you dress head to toe and stick out, here's your fat check,
Right.
But it impedes my authenticity and my freedom.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I don't like it. I pretty much stick to mostly the code stuff to generate an income. And then that way I can wear Origin and I can wear KUIU and I can wear,
Right. Back to the social media thing. I wonder, and maybe you were going to get there on this, Brian, but one thing that I noticed is really interesting is that, and this is from somebody who like had fairly small social media following. And then for me, kind of we were talking about your experience with Rogan and stuff like that was like kind of a pivotal thing for me too. Not necessarily that I got like a massive bump when I was on Rogan, but I actually got like more just like slow momentum. And I think that's part of it's related to that. And this was an interesting experience in its whole week. I'd love to talk to you about it more, but, one thing I noticed is that as my social media grew, I started to realize like what you just hit on, and that's that follower accounts, for better or worse, in all these different venues, like all these different platforms. They matter if you're in this business, and it's stunning to me how different they can be. Like from my like interaction with them, I literally I figured out a way to grow on Instagram and on YouTube that I was like, oh, okay, if I keep doing this, I'll like, if I kept doing a certain type of strategy, instead of having 100 and whatever I have, 120, 130,000 subscribers, I would have 1 million followers, right? Or 1 million subscribers right now.
You just push the money button.
Yeah, well, and what I had figured out is that if I made short form content that was really snappy, and it was skinning animals, that sort of thing, and I actually think that there is some value to that, because I actually really like that, Brian. Like I like just knowing how to break down an animal, how to skin an animal. I'm really into salt my own hides. Like I really enjoy like knowing the full skill set. So that's why I originally provided that content, and I still think there's still value there, and I'll do some of it. But as I started to provide that, I started to notice that, okay, if I do this a little bit and I change the volume a little bit, I could game it where every single one of them would get 3, 4, 500,000 views. Several of them would get 5 million views, and my subscriber base would go up. But what I would notice is that like the things that really matter to me, like people signing up for my hunts and seminars, my email list where I really have like a true interaction with them, it didn't grow at all. And I thought, and I can only do so much. I'm sure you're the same way. I found that for a period of time, I was only doing that. And I'm like, oh, well, this is going to grow this like business, and I'm going to get more exposure. And then people will see my YouTube stuff that's, helps them with backcountry hunting or whatever. Totally did not happen. All it did was increase those numbers. Like all it did was increase those numbers. And it actually took away from like my core, like kind of how-to stuff, because I couldn't do it. I can't, I can't do both. I don't have the capacity to do both. And it really like opened my eyes to like, oh, like, unfortunately, for better or worse, these numbers don't mean that much. And you can kind of get off track chasing them, and it can mess your kind of, I think that's the value you provide.
Dude, you're speaking my language 1,000%. There's this lyric in a song that says, this is the industry where it's not how big you are, it's how big you seem. And I look at social media this way. If your revenue model for running a brand like what you and I are doing, podcasts and so forth, if your revenue model is sponsorships, you're going to get the biggest sponsorships when you have the biggest social media presence. It's perception. It's how big you seem. Are you getting photos with all the cool kids at TAC? Are you out here? Are you hobnobbing with this group? Are you doing this thing over there? Are you posting tons of pictures of you just doing cool stuff? Is social media like, man, that guy's hopping, that guy's it, that guy's the guy? Like if you're posting all of that kind of stuff on social media, companies, they just love it. And they're like, write him a check, sponsor that guy.
Yeah.
You could have the biggest podcast known to man like Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan's social media presence is pretty sad. Like it's just, he just posts some random stuff on Instagram.
Yeah, he's not. Yeah.
He doesn't care. It's a photo with a guy. Like it's not his jam. Right. And, but he's got a massive following through the podcast medium. So I look at that and I realized that, I have peers who get big sponsorship dollars. They put a lot of time into perception on social media. But if we were to both run a code for a product through their channels and my channels, I'll sell 10 to 1 of that product.
Yeah.
10, it's like, so companies get focused on a social media presence to decide who to sponsor.
Right.
But they're not tracking at a code level who's really making the sales.
Right. Sure.
And a lot of companies don't do that because they don't do any direct. They sell, for example, they'll sell product through Cabela's, Sportsman's, Shields, all that, right? So they can't sell direct with a code because it undercuts the map pricing at retail outlets and so on. But when I grab little companies, they sell out of their garage. Grakksaw, he's just selling boot dryers he's invented and some game bags, and we are selling a lot of them because it's a great product that met the needs of an audience. And but that's not sponsorship driven,
right?
And I think a lot of time can be spent, because I look at a lot of that social media stuff as smoke and mirrors at the end of the day. There are some good social media channels where I'm like, oh, it's always entertaining. It's always educational. It's always inspiring. Oh, cool. I like that.
Yeah.
But for the most part, Cliff, long form communication is where the meaning is.
Right.
That's where the meaning is. That's where you learn how to hunt. That's where you get inspired to go on your own backcountry, late season hunt or archery elk. You watch a film and it was something that touched you and you're like, dude, I got to go on a moose hunt. I've been postponing it my whole life. I think I can pull this one off. These guys did it. It inspires me. I'm going to go do it. You're not going to get that from a picture on Instagram.
Right. Yeah.
And so Instagram is this sort of space. I see it as, look how popular I am. That's what it's for. Look how popular I am. It's not so much about, here's some meaningful content that will impact your life in a way that will change it forever. Think about it. At the end of a year, if people consume my content, they got in better shape. They quit their jobs and did something that they were passionate about. They became a better archer. They went and had an adventure that they'd been postponing forever. Like whatever it is they got from the content I created, because it's got depth and meaning, and it takes me weeks to produce one film that you're consuming. This isn't something that I just took a picture of and posted it to Instagram with some cute saying. It's not like that. And so to me, you actually change people's lives, and the law of reciprocation comes into play because people that are so positively impacted by the content you created, like you giving people true empowerment to go out and kill that elk, teaching them how to hunt. Those people then go out and they do the thing, and they kill the elk. They hold you in a regard in their life on a certain standing because of what you did for them. And they will always appreciate that about you, because you changed their life. You empowered them in a way that gave them the ability to do something maybe they didn't know they could do. And from that day forward, there's generally an appreciation. They may not follow your content that much anymore. They might have moved on, but they'll still regard you as an individual, as someone they appreciate. Yeah. And when opportunities do arise to, hey, I'm going to go support this, or I'm going to buy that, or I'm going to help Cliff in this way, they go out of their way to do it. Okay, folks, if you like the show and you want to support us and you're in the market for a brand new sleeping bag, check out the Peaks Solace 15. We spent a lot of years designing that sleeping bag in partnership with Peaks Equipment. The Peaks sleeping bag has so many innovative features. The old backpacker saying that 2 is 1 and 1 is none is never more true. And this sleeping bag is so versatile. It can be a quilt, it can be a jacket. It's got armholes. It's a 3-way zipper. It regulates temperature really well. It's got the hood. It's pretty remarkable. Go check it out. Use the code GRITTY and you'll save. And it helps us keep doing what we do. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yeah. And I think what it is, I've like tried to think deep about this, Brian. I think it's like this whole social media interaction is like a, relatively new thing to humans, and we're into building trust, right? And to me, like I look at my behavior, right? Like, I've been years ago, I used to shoot a recurve a whole lot, and I haven't shot a traditional bow in a long time. And a guy sent me a guy made me a longbow. It's a guy who watched my YouTube channel, which is like awesome, right? Like,
Yeah.
a handmade longbow. So I'm like, I got to shoot this thing. I'm going to take it on a hunt, try to shoot a pig or deer or something with it and get it going. So I started watching Clay Hayes stuff.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with
Yeah,
Clay?
yeah.
I don't know Clay. I've maybe traded a couple messages with him or something over the years, but watching his long form content, like it's so weird that I cannot have a relationship with the guy. He probably doesn't even know my name, but I trust him. Like because of the long form content, like he says something about the, marksmanship with a longbow. I go out and try it in my backyard. It's like, okay, it worked. He explains it real well. And it's like you build this trust that's amazing that I think that you could only build before in person with people. You know what I mean?
Right. Yep. I agree. I think that I was talking to Rogan one time and he was like, it was years ago, but he was saying, because I was experiencing it myself, people would walk up to me and talk to me like they'd known me for years.
Oh, sure.
Hey, Ryan, hug. Like, I want a
Yeah.
picture, because their familiarity with me was intense, because they had listened to me in their car 1 hour a day for 12 months.
Yeah, sure.
Catching up on all my content and all the stuff I produced over the years, and they just binged it all. And by the time they've sat with me for an hour a day, that many days in a row, they kind of do know me, Cliff.
Yeah, they know you. They know you
Like
really
I
well.
feel like I know Joe Rogan.
Yeah, well,
I've listened to Joe so much. I feel like, dude, he's not a mystery to me. Like, I feel like I know Ranella. Now, Steve and I have only spoken twice, and he probably doesn't even remember those conversations. And, but I've listened to Ranella for so long. I feel like he's my uncle, or I feel like I just know him.
Yeah.
And, it's an interesting dynamic, right? Because of the medium that you're using. And I think it's much more, podcasting is a way that people get to know you, by the way, in a much more intimate way. Like, for example, I have a podcast, you have a podcast, there are certain people that have a podcast. Then there's guys that have really only been exposed on film, let's say like a Jason Matzinger or a Donnie Vincent. They haven't really had their own podcasts. They've been guests on some, but they're sort of, what you see is what you were presented in the show, right?
Right.
It's a much more curated version of the person. So it's like, if you're on the outside, how familiar are you with them exactly? It's like Tom Cruise. They say like the last of the movie stars. You only know Tom through film.
Right.
He's not on social media. You really don't know anything else too much about him. It's pretty much, he's not accessible. He's not on a whole bunch of talk shows and podcasts and stuff like that. When he has a movie drop, he comes out and does a little tour, and then that's it. It's like, so the podcast medium, it creates a familiarity with people that other things don't, I think.
Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Earlier, changing back to the gear stuff, you were mentioning how you felt like how people weren't responding to you. When you would take your gear suggestion back to a company and they'd be like, thanks, Cliff, but we got it.
Yeah.
That's the response that we got.
Yeah.
And I kind of was saying, well, I think part of that is, they think they got it figured out, already. Like you couldn't possibly have more knowledge than they have. Maybe I don't quite know. You were kind of you had a hypothesis that was a little bit different. I mean, what do you think that's about? That these bigger companies don't really take the feedback when it's so valuable.
Yeah, you know what I think it is, Brian. And if you don't mind, I'll use like the same example that we were talking about because I think it's kind of easier for me to explain it that way. It's like, so me and you do kind of different hunting. Like there's some overlap, but you do a lot of long duration stuff. So to me, like backpack hunting more than 5 days, that's a long duration backpack hunt in my world. Like everybody who sees on social media me guiding mountain goat hunts in Colorado or bighorn sheep hunts in Colorado, even my like the elk hunting backpack hunts, which I don't do a whole lot of elk hunting backpack hunts. They're like all my long duration elk hunting is horse and mule based stuff, right? But let's take the other hunts that are real backpack hunts. Like a long goat hunt for me, a backpack goat hunt's 4 days, right? So all I'm getting at is that me and you have some overlap in our skill set, the gear we use, all of that. But we also have a unique use case in a sense that you might use the same piece of gear for twice as long, which makes it so in certain use cases you have some really valuable knowledge. So let's take the situation where I wanted to get into the gear business, which honestly, Brian, like I've entertained it. I think it's an interesting world, the hunting gear world. And so let's say that I want to get into the backcountry shelter business, say teepees, let's say, right? And so I give them to you and Lampers. I give you guys some sample products, and I say, go out and use these on your long duration hunts because I'm not going to market them just for my 5-day sheep hunts. I'm going to market them to guys that want to go. They want to go into the Salmon River system for 15 days or whatever in Idaho, right? Yeah. And so that exposure. So I want you guys to go give it a go. And then you come back and you've got a list of like 30 critiques, right? All of which are constructive, seem valuable. I think if I'm being totally honest, it's going to be hard for me as a hunter to set my ego aside and my own experience and not be like, you know what? Like, I think there'd be a tendency for me like, Brian, I think I'm good, man. Because in my experience, I didn't have that same issue. You know what I mean? I think there's just, I think we all have an ego, particularly hunters, particularly guys that have the balls to go out and like make a product sometimes. And so I actually think, maybe it's not all of it, but I think sometimes it's hard for us to look at other people's experience. And even if it's different than ours and we know that, we're just biased to what we feel is right. And I think that's what slows down a lot of improvement, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I can think of specific product designs that we brought to companies and asked for, and they basically turned their nose at it. And then we took it to someone else. They did it, and the market rewarded them greatly for it.
Right.
And so then it's like, well, how do you like it now? You
sure.
Didn't like the advice. You thought we were, at whatever reason, you didn't take it. So we went over here, and now it's outselling your product.
Right. And
maybe there is a part of me that's spiteful like that. I'm definitely like Lampers. Like,
yeah, of course.
He's like, Brian, you've got a chip on your shoulder all the time. I do, because I feel like I'm kind of surprised when I have a level of experience and it's completely discounted.
Yeah.
And I try not to take it personal, but when anybody tells me I can't do something, then I just have this overwhelming drive to prove them wrong. When someone says I'm going to fail or I won't make it, that just makes me want to stay in this losing endeavor until I prove it that it can be.
Yeah.
Like I'm just that person that the more you hate me, the more I want to prove you wrong.
Yeah. Well, and at least for me, and you may not feel this, Brian, I think some of my and spite I think is a pretty good word for it. Like some of my angst about this is like, okay, so somebody hits me up and they have a cool product. They say, "Hey, you mind trying it?" Yeah, of course I'll try it, right? And I go try it.
Sacrifice.
Yeah, like and that's the thing. It's like what you just said. Like for me to try something, and I don't mean this in an egotistical way. It just is what it is. For me to try something, I don't care if you send it to me for free. Like it cost me something to try it because I'm good, man. Like with what I'm doing, I'm good. I don't need anything new. From now to the day I die. So there's a cost to trying it. Now, sometimes it's nice if I like it. I can make content with it on YouTube and that sort of thing. So that is a benefit to me. But when you send me something, or I buy it from you, it doesn't really matter in a sense. But we have a communication and it's all good. But then when I send feedback, you ignore it. It's kind of like, I almost feel like I'm a hooker and you're telling me that you love me. Yep, but really all you want is you just send me it so it ends up in my content. That's really you're trying to get exposure. And I think for me that's like always like it rubs me wrong because it's like, oh dude, like it's almost like you're discounting the part of this that I actually think is pretty important. And I'm sure that's partly my ego, right? Like I think my experience is important.
You bring up a really good, I'd say that rubs Lampers more than me like that. Like there's a way where you're saying, they're sending you the product and they're saying, please give us feedback. We really want to see, we want to make all, and then when you give it to them, they're like, yeah, no, we just really wanted you. We thought we had it figured out and we just wanted you to like it.
Yeah. And put it on, and put it out there.
Yeah. And just, we weren't actually interested in changing it. We really were just trying, we just thought we had it dialed and, and we still think we do, And so it's refreshing when you can go to a company, a builder, a designer, and say, here's this idea. What do you think about it? And then go back and forth and collaborate and really build products that are really neat. What I ran into, Cliff, way back was I felt like, well, who am I to offer advice to this big fancy company who makes tents for a living or backpacks for a living or trekking poles? Like who am I to they've thought of everything that and they have all these resources and teams and people who are CAD designers and all this stuff. So surely like I just felt this high level of who am I to suggest how things should be made. Right. Over the years, using the products and being out in the field as much as I am, things start to become obvious that are wrong with products.
Right.
And what when I used to feel that way, it's because I didn't have the experience using a piece of gear. Now I know what I don't like or what's not working, and I can go back to a company. I don't necessarily know what the best solution is to the problem, but I am excellent at identifying the problem.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
This just sucks. This doesn't work. This is a pain. This is fix this, and then I can throw out, it's funny because I will throw out some ideas to a couple of the engineers and stuff. I'm like, I think you could do this. And they're like, okay, Brian, stick to the problem identification. Like they didn't know that under these temperatures that this sort of thing would happen and you'd have this problem with the fabric. And so they're like, okay, got it. And I'll throw out these ideas, but I don't have the background or the design experience to come up with the most effective solution. And I'll throw out some ideas and it's obvious I don't have that background. And so sometimes I'm right, but very rarely. They come up with something to fix the problem that fixes it, genuinely fixes it. No more issue, but I'd never have come up with that. Never.
Right.
But they would never have figured out the problem with their design if they didn't have a tester like me to prove it.
Yeah, and get it into that like end case kind of scenario that nobody, like none of their testing had done yet. Right.
Right.
Yeah. And that's it's very interesting. And the other thing is I think all these folks that make gear, they're really good at like the manufacturing process, all their logistics, like all of that. They're like experts. They're experts at it. And I think it's kind of like that same effect, Brian. Like they're so good at that. they don't really want to mess with that to change something for you. And I understand that can be very hard. Like a lot of times the most common, like if somebody gives me an explanation why they won't change something, it's usually because of like the manufacturing process.
Or they hold like a ton of inventory.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
and they're like, well, look, we have to sell all this inventory before we could change it up. And that would require a new machine for this and a new mold, or, and they're like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah. We can't do it till we get, yeah. And that's just a business.
I understand that. It's always a balance in that regard, but the more a company can adapt, I mean, they'll come out ahead in the end.
Yeah. Over time. Absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things that I've found is I see guys that review gear or do a gear dump for a backpack hunt. And I look at their gear list and I see the gear they're using. I see the weight of their pack. And I'll see a shelter they review. They'll review like 4 shelters.
Yeah.
And they'll be like, this is the best one. And I'll see that and I'll be like, yeah, all 4 of those shelters didn't even make the cut to even review. Like there's like 7 other ones that are elite levels above that.
Yeah.
But it's like me when I first started the Gritty podcast. I only know what I knew, and I only had the gear that I had tested.
Yeah.
And so, I was just sharing you at the level I had. I was sharing with you what I knew about the experience at the level I'm at.
Yeah, sure.
And that's all you can do. Like you, for example, when you're telling people how to hunt, you're sharing at the level you're at. And there's a million people below that. But there could be a ton of people above that are like, Cliff doesn't really have it all figured out.
I'm sure I don't have it all figured out, dude.
But you know what I mean? Like you have to approach this stuff. So I don't begrudge anyone when I see them reviewing 4 shelters and they're like, this is the best shelter. I am acutely aware of the fact that I know I can assess their experience level right away. Right. I can go, wow, they still really aren't that experienced at this thing that they're sharing information about. And it's the same thing when I'll see a shelter review or a headlamp or various pieces of equipment. Though, this is the best. This thing has been amazing. I loved it. And I'll look at it. I'm like, and I quit using that kind of style like 8 years ago. Like it's so far back. And so I think I'm not offended by it. Like I expect that, but I do get a little bit annoyed when I see really uninformed like gear dumps and stuff.
Yeah. Well, I can't remember what his name is. I apologize, but he's oh man, he's a Canadian guy, and he's been doing like
Jay.
Jay. Yeah, have you had him on?
Mindful Hunter.
Yeah. Do you know him?
I was on his podcast, and then we're trying to hook up and have him join mine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. He's his business model's interesting, and he's an interesting guy because he's
I really like Jay, and I really like his style. His reviews are thorough. But that's a good example where I'll see Jay review 4 products that for me are not even worth reviewing. Yeah. There's 4 others on a tier better.
Yeah.
But Jay only knows what he's had his hands on and what he's used.
Yeah, he's been exposed to those. Yeah, it's interesting. When I was talking to him, he actually asked me about, we were kind of talking about a similar idea and concept, and he asked me, I think, hey, if like a young guy in the hunting world wants to get sponsored, right? Mm-hmm. Which to me is kind of like a hilarious concept, right? Like you can't and it was my response to him too, and I'm sure it came across as somewhat asinine. But my response to him is like, well, if you're a 22-year-old guy trying to get like sponsored in the hunting world, you should probably go out and like do it for a while. You know what I mean? Like how is that even a thing? You know what I mean? But it is a thing. It is a thing in the hunting world. And I don't think that it's unique to the hunting world. I think there's other things too. And I'm kind of like the same way. Like I don't begrudge a guy who's 23 years old and he's hunted elk for 3 years and he's got 300,000 followers on Instagram or whatever. Like, I don't have an issue with the guy, but it is it's intriguing because it's like, okay, he's got a certain amount of experience. It might be a fair amount relative, but he's really going whole hog on the gear thing. And it's just kind of it's an interesting dynamic that I try to think about outside of the hunting world on things that I'm trying to figure out or gear I'm looking at. Like, does this guy really have like the knowledge that I want to, that I want to like follow? And it's are you from, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, on that subject, if you look at this happened to me years ago. Okay, so I had started the podcast. I had a big audience within the first 2 years. Corey Jacobson had Extreme Elk Magazine and Elk 101 and all this stuff, and he had like 9 contributors about elk hunting. I think they each had killed like 30 6x6 bulls with their bows. By then, some more than that. Mm-hmm. With my bow, I think I had killed 5 by then. Like, I felt like these guys were on a league above me.
Yeah, sure.
And he's like, I want you to be a contributor, And I was like, Corey, dude, I don't belong in this. I'm looking at each guy's name in this group. They're killers. I do not belong in this group.
Yeah.
Their skill levels on hunting elk are just way beyond me. And Corey's like, you know how to kill elk. You've killed them. You've backpacked in. You've done things. You've done it. But guess what, Brian? They're more experienced than you, but you have 10x or 100x the following that they have.
Right.
He's like, I'm in this situation where you're only going to share what you know at the level you know. But guess what? The audience trusts you and is tuning into you. They want to hear your opinion. I'm like,
right.
He's like, for whatever reason, they want your opinion. And he's like, I don't get to decide whose opinion they want.
Yeah, sure.
All I can do is provide the ideas. And he's like, you're aware that these guys have more experience and have killed more than you, and you'll ask them a lot of questions. But at the same time, it's not like you don't have any knowledge. And guess what? You have the people wanting to hear it from you. I look at this Caitlyn Clark situation in women's basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you followed it at all, but
barely. But
college scene, she's just a phenom. She's got 5-7 million people watching the championship games.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous, right? She enters the WNBA and she's playing, and she's right now she's a rookie, but she's kind of, she's an average-ish player in the WNBA. And she sells out tickets, 10,000 seats, to these 17,000, where other stadiums are selling 3,000 seats without her.
Right.
So there's all these teams with way better teams than hers. There's all these teams with far better athletes than her, at least at this stage, her rookie year. Yet she's selling 10-1 the tickets.
Yeah.
People want to watch Caitlyn Clark. They don't give a damn about the rest of the league.
Yeah,
or anybody else in it.
Yeah.
Why? She's not the best. So I look at some of this and I go, how do you strike that balance? Like, I wasn't qualified to be telling you a whole bunch about how to kill elk, but people wanted to hear it from me or a subset of an audience.
It's a chicken and egg thing, Brian. Like, why do they want that from you? It might be a little bit different than the basketball analogy. With the was it Caitlyn?
Yeah,
might be a little bit different, but I think with you, the thing is that they trust you. That don't you think they've developed?
I think
trust,
that's what it is. There's trust. There's also, it's like in high school. It's like in college. You have a fun professor and you have a boring professor. And maybe the boring professor is a much more informed professor.
Right.
And he knows way more, but he's just so boring you can barely get through it.
Yeah, sure.
Like, people want to learn, but they want to be entertained at the same time.
Yeah, sure.
And I think
it's important.
In some way, the way I delivered it was just more palatable, more engaging, more fun to be part of. even though the quality of the information wasn't on the same level, because I don't have the experience. I don't have the skill set.
Yeah, but it still matters because the information that you were putting out there, it got to more people because people enjoyed listening to it.
So it's a weird thing because now it's different. Now I've killed a ton of animals. I've put more days in the field than people do in a lifetime. In the last decade. And so I'm no longer the person I was back then. It's a different person. And what's interesting about that too is there are people who still, especially like, let's say you grew up hunting with somebody and they were always a little better than you at hunting, but then I went down this career path and now I'm 1,000% more skilled and experienced.
Yeah, just through iteration, sure.
But the person that grew up with you that used to be better than you just sees you the same as before. They can't see that you're not the same hunter back then. Like, there's too much ego there to be like, to recognize that they've been completely surpassed. It's the same thing early on. I think people who came on the podcast early didn't like me, moved on, and they're like, even to this day, Brian doesn't know what he's doing. It's like, well, it's been a decade. Been a lot. Like what I know now, not the same as 7 years ago, 5 years ago, even 2.
But Brian, I actually think it's a really interesting topic because so you've dedicated a lot of your life to getting better at it intentionally, right?
Yep.
And it's weird because people ask me always about like my choice to be in outfitting and guiding and that sort of thing. And for sure, an element of that, Brian, was in my mind the most efficient way at that time in my life to really like be OCD about getting better at it. It was the only way I could figure out to have the time to iterate on this specific thing. You know what I mean? And I think it's hard. I think in a way it's hard for people to fathom that. Like you've dedicated a tremendous amount of your life getting better at this skill set and you've intentionally done it. And I mean, the reality is like it's like lifetimes of experience in there. And it's hard for people to fathom that if they're living a normal life where they go hunting 4 or 5 days a year. And for me, man, I really notice this as I pick up other hobbies, Brian, because everything I do, for better or worse, I get obsessed with it. And in my mind, I think like, oh, I want to be elite at it. Right. And like, I've noticed it. I've been off and on spearfisherman my whole life, but I've never been good at it really, because I can only go in the off season, that sort of thing. But in the last couple of years since I sold my outfitting business, I've really I've like put myself in position to be around like the best guys. Right. And what's crazy is it's like the first time in my life I've had this epiphany of being like, okay, I'm 40 years old. I'm never going to be as good as these guys. Like I'm diving with guys that I'll never, it doesn't matter. Like I can't functionally,
oh, dude,
like it's so odd because like, and maybe I'm just like a psycho, but it took me 40 years to figure out like there's things that like there's just no way
to catch up.
Yeah, there's no way. Yeah,
no. I get this a lot. So there's a whole. Everybody has a hater that has any kind of reach or does cool stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And I've got my army of haters, and they tend to be, their criticism is, Brian rides the coattails of hunters that are better than him. That's all he does. He's not a very good hunter himself, and so what he's done is he just leverages others to help him find the animal, to kill the animal. Like without that other person, he's just nothing. Namely Ryan Lampers is one of those people that they'll call out. You've just used Ryan to get it. Now, first of all, of course I've hunted with someone. I want to get better. I got a mentor.
Yeah, sure.
Who could blow my mind and teach me things. I think Ryan's probably one of the best he is one of the best hunters in the world in North America. In you know, the way that we've grown up, he's a phenomenal hunter. He's just gifted.
Sure.
I think Remy Warren's like that. I think there's a handful of guys that are just like, I've spent time with Adam Greentree. That guy just, they're amazing. And there's no amount of time that I could hunt and catch up to Ryan. No amount.
Yeah.
He's forever better than me and ahead of me. I'll, like what you were just saying with those guys you're diving with. I'm never, ever going to catch up. Now, I've gotten a lot better.
Sure.
I'm a much better, but Ryan will always be better. He just will.
Yeah.
I can't, just his uncanny nature of just predicting when an animal is going to move, when it's not going to move, when to draw your bow, when not to. Like, I learn a little bit every year and I'm better and better and better, but he's just on a level that's uncanny.
Yeah.
And that's just, you know, I can't sit here and replace. He's been doing 100 days a year in the field since he was 13. I've been doing 100 days, 150 days a year since I was 40. Like, you know, I'm 49. Like, there's a difference. I can't catch up to the other 30 years he has on me of legit 100 days a year in the field. This man has spent his days in the woods, like Clay, like Hayes. You're not going to go and do, you know, alone like Clay.
Yeah.
And no matter how much you try right now, you'll never catch up.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah.
So, you know, there is criticism, and I don't care. It's like, yeah, of course I wanted to hunt with someone who can teach me things that make me be, my goal is to be better, not to be him. You know, my goal is to just, it's a pursuit that I love and I'll never master, but that's kind of why I love it. Now, on the flip side, there's gifts I have that Ryan can never emulate. He can't make films.
Yeah.
You know, he can't run the cameras. He can't edit. He can't produce like I do. And so we're a good fit. I bring things to the table to tell Ryan's story. I learn from Ryan and I share it with the public. It's like a beautiful thing. Right.
Right.
And I love that sort of that partnership, you know, but I'm learning so much from that relationship. And it was great because the list of people who can go hunt with me for 100 days a year, it's pretty short.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. For probably psychological reasons, but also just for practical,
financial and practical.
Life reasons.
But I find it, I think a lot of times though, Cliff, those criticisms are just, they're just a form of jealousy. Whenever you do something remarkable, you'll have a number of people who are bitter over it, you know?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I hear you. And in the end, man, it's like a practical, like it's a proven practical strategy to get good at something is go find somebody who's like the best and start hanging around them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
And it's a little less so now, I think, Brian, but I think in the hunting world, it's still so accessible. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I think just online, the accessibility of things online.
Sure.
You know, because now someone can log in, check out what you're doing and offering, and have a major life improvement.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's a interesting, it's something I wonder, like it sounds like you've like purposely done that, you know, in the hunting world, and probably other things you do. And I have too. And I don't know if that's, and I wonder why more people don't do that. I feel like, let's like stick to hunting. I feel like a lot of people, they almost want to stay only hunting with like their peer group they've always been hunting with because they just feel comfortable. And it's almost like if they went hunting with somebody who they felt like was, you know, had a unique skill set, maybe just for that species, that topography, whatever, they almost like, it's hard for them to accept that. I noticed that guiding a lot. Mm-hmm. You know, I mean, like, it wouldn't, a lot of times it wouldn't be me. It'd be like a guide who's working for me, and a hunter would come to me and they would tell me, you know, just how much wrong the guide was doing. And the guide would be a 23-year-old guy. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, the guide probably is not doing everything on earth perfect, but that guy's been working for me for 4 years, and he's hunted elk for 400 days already. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like
Yeah.
he's pretty tuned in. And it's weird because it's I almost think it's a psychological thing. Sometimes it's very hard, and it might be the fact, that's a male dominated thing too, that males just have a hard time kind of accepting, like, okay, this guy's like a little superior to me in this niche. I don't know. It's always been curious to me.
I always tell my kids and my friends, you become like the 5 people you hang out with the most.
Yeah.
So if I want to be rich, I need to hang out with a bunch of rich people.
Yeah,
Like,
sure.
If I want to be a better hunter, I need to hang out with some of the best hunters and spend all my time with them. Like, you do become like the people you spend the most time with. It's just sort of I think that is a very true saying. So if you hang out with riffraff and low achievers and losers, the bar's not very high for you to be the leader of that group.
Yeah.
But it's not pushing you to be much more than what you are. When you go and you hunt with someone who is leagues ahead of you, it just comes over time. You just grow so much. It's the same in business. Get with people who are so much better than you at business. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden you're like seeing things you weren't before.
Right.
So I think that it's an absolute brilliant strategy to go and try to find individuals that you would consider tiers above you in categories that
Right.
you're trying to improve yourself on. And just by their association over time, you'll become much more like them.
Yeah.
And the same is in reverse. Like, if you decide, I don't like that, it's uncomfortable, I'm going to stick with these low achievers, some peers I grew up with, then you just stay the same.
Yeah. No, I
Just
think
like you're
that's,
saying.
yeah. And it's hard to do it, right? I mean, just as like an example, Brian, like I don't know the last time that I've been on a backpack hunt over 8 days. So if you called me up and you're like, hey, we're going to go on a 14-day backpack hunt, it'd be like, oh, I want to do that because I'm going to be able to learn some stuff from those guys. But when I show up, I'm low man on the pecking order. You know what I mean? In terms of status. And I think that's hard, man. It's hard to it's hard to swallow that. I mean, it's in my back to the diving thing. It's been very hard for me, jump on a boat with guys and I'm like, oh, I'm the idiot. You know what I mean? But it's the best way to do it. But you gotta swallow your pride a little bit, in those situations.
Absolutely. And honestly, I just think pride doesn't do me much good across the board.
Right.
In general. Like, willing to be humiliated, to fail in public, and to just roll forward. Like, that's what makes winners, honestly. You have to be willing to just wet the bed and then live with the consequences and keep on going without exposure and, exposing yourself to failure in the public eye. I just don't think you grow that much in the end. A lot of people want to do something like what you've done or I've done, but they don't want to risk looking stupid or failing or being ridiculed or hated. And that's just the cost of doing business. If you want to achieve something and be something, you just have to know you're going to be, you're going to go through the fire. You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to be humiliated at times. And it's just how it goes.
Right.
I think it takes, if you can develop the confidence to be like, but I know what I'm about, and I'm expecting some degrees of failure in the public eye or in front of these peers. It's just what it is.
Yeah, for sure. No,
but it's hard
absolutely.
because of the ego thing, because of the pride thing, because of the fear thing. So I think I look at that stuff as such I think it's pretty sad when you see people miss out on opportunities because of the fear of what people might think.
Yeah. For me, Brian, I think it's like if if somebody comes to me like, well, like, guides that used to work for me and stuff, like young guys that are 18, 19, 20 years old. If I had one piece of advice on that front, it'd be like, man, get used to doing it when you're young. Because man, I got buddies where it's basically impossible for them. You know what I mean?
I agree. I read a quote by Tim Ferriss in one of his books, and it said, your success in life can be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations you're willing to have.
Right.
And that stuck out to me because any conversation I was like, man, that's an awkward, difficult conversation. I don't want to,
Yeah.
I just avoid it. Let's just pretend that didn't happen. Let's just, avoid confrontation, all that kind of stuff. Right. I remember reading that. I was probably mid-30s, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not dodging a single conversation anymore. If the more uncomfortable it is, I'm just going to go head on to it, and I'm going to do it.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be successful in life, I got to have really uncomfortable conversations, being willing to do it, being able to do it effectively. And I made that a habit in my life. And I still, to this day, it's like, now if there's an uncomfortable conversation to have, it's like, bring it on. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's knock this one out. I used to have so much anxiety over that stuff. Now I just don't, you do it enough. You don't. And it's true. A lot of my success I've had over the years is because I'm willing to have those conversations, and I'm willing to have them quick and early, which puts things right back on a right path, or it gets me out of a situation early that wasn't going to work out in the long run anyway. Hey, if you like our show and you want to support us, you can do that by shopping at Stealthy Hunter, a great partner of ours. They sell rifle covers, which we use on every single hunt. They sell glassing pads. They sell supplements. They got CBD gummies, other products over there. Check it out. Make sure you use the code GRITTY. And now back to the show.
Yeah, and you can allocate your time and resources to other things, which is a lot of value to that,
So tell folks that are listening, like, what you're working on now, what's going on, and tell us a little bit about. I know this is kind of toward the end here, but tell us a little bit about Cliff Gray.
Yeah, man. So I've spent now most of my adult life, Brian, as an outfitter and guide. Like, most of my career has been in that world, which it still kind of is hilarious to me because I didn't have any intention of that occurring. I came out of an ag family. My dad was an outfitter when I was a kid, but I went and did other things in life in my early 20s. And then I transitioned. I bought a business in the flat tops in Colorado, and I kind of just jumped into it head over heels and grew that business. And I operated it for 11 years, and then I sold it 3 years ago. So that's mostly what I've done, like, as a career, which is kind of hilarious to me. But anyways, I got out of that business, and then, did, like, I think anybody who makes these little pivots in life, like, maybe you take 9 months and try to figure out life a little bit.
Yeah.
But for me, within 3 or 4 months, I was getting a little bit, you get bored about stuff, like, you can't, so you want to start working on something else. So I've been working on the social media stuff. So my YouTube channel is a fair amount of my time. I've got my podcast going. So there's an allocation of time there. But for me, and it kind of goes back to, we talked a lot about, like, the business model of this whole thing in this discussion. You have such a broader, knowledge of that world. So it's interesting to talk to you about it. But for me, Brian, like, I get more value out of the idea of either motivating somebody to go on, like, their first hunting trip, or taking them on their first hunting trip. I get, like, that is, like, the apex for me. Like, if somebody asked me that, like, in my outfitting, when I was outfitting, guiding, if somebody asked me, like, the why of the business, I'd be like, well, the why is so I can make a living, make some money, build some equity in something. Yep. And then also it's a good way for me to be hunting a lot. And anybody that, I mean, that's the thing, is, like, people are like, well, guides and outfitters don't get to hunt a lot. Well, it depends on your definition of hunting, but they hunt a low to the point
Right.
where they get exhausted with it a little bit, but anyways, that was the why, right? So in this new endeavor for me, the why is like taking the little like one of the apexes of my guiding experience, and that was like taking a new person into this world.
Yeah.
Right. So for me on YouTube, I get the comment like, "Hey Cliff, I watched your videos, all last summer, applied some of this stuff. Like, here's the bull I killed, right? Here's the raghorn I killed and the San Juans or whatever. Like, that's awesome. Right. And then now I've been doing they're hunts. Well, most of them are hunts that have a seminar component in them. So they're just like a hands-on thing, and they're geared towards newer folks, not necessarily people who haven't hunted at all, but people who,
That's cool.
I guess to some extent, Brian, it's like people who might have the fear that we were talking about, like, or they don't have access to anybody around them that has a lot of hunting experience. So they can go on, one of these hunts, and it's framed as a learning opportunity. I know that might sound weird to your audience. Like, well, isn't all hunting framed as like a learning opportunity? And the reality is, in the guiding hunting world, it's not at all. You know what I mean? A lot of it is very, mission oriented, and the culture of the guides and everything else is like, is kind of like, why are you asking me questions? Let's just do it. So I wanted to provide experiences that it was framed in a different way. It's like, hey, we're going hunting, but finding a bear, finding an elk or whatever is part of the goal here. But the primary goal that I want the clients to think of is like, you just pick our brains, right? Like, we're going to do through the formal little seminar stuff, which is really just in person covering a lot of the stuff that's on my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
But the other component of that is like, I want you to feel comfortable just asking every question that you think stupid during the hunt, and guys like it. So that's kind of what I've been focused on.
I'll tell you, like I've said this before, I'm so goal oriented when it comes to the actual killing the animal and getting the thing.
Yeah.
I'm obsessive. And so I get like that. And when I'm working with someone who doesn't have as much experience, I consider it a gift. Like, Lampers is really good. He's really good with his own daughter, and he's very good. He enjoys seeing other people hunt and succeed and all of that.
Sure.
I do too, but I'm just not a great guide type guy.
Yeah.
I'm just like, hey, dumbass, put that thing on the thing. And what were you doing? Like, you just kicked too many rocks. Of course he ran away. Like, I'm so like frustrated when it doesn't, when it's not, when the person isn't that skilled. And so my wife is like, I don't like hunting with you. My kids are like, this is too much, and I've been out with some of my best friends, Ryan. I've seen people with such patience and skill in that, and I have a lot of respect for it.
Yeah. I think one of the challenges, Brian, is actually probably related to some of the types of hunts that you're doing. Like, the way you described yourself, like as not a good guide, like, dude, that's 95% of the guides working in like the Colorado mountains or like something like that. And I think part of it, dude, is practical, right? Like you said, like you're trying to succeed. Like, if you're hunting low point stuff or over the counter stuff in Colorado, like, let's be honest, man, like, you're not going to get a bunch of opportunities in like a 7-day hunt. So it's hard when you're guiding because you don't really have the capacity to deal with it, to deal with like a new hunter and the mistakes and that sort of thing, because that, hey, if they're, we're hunting for them on this hunt, if they mess up, like, let's say they're going to mess up or let's say in our mind, we're like, statistically, they're going to mess up the next 7 opportunities. Well, that could mean 4 years.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point.
So that's like a really big challenge. Man,
because I do want to go on a hunt with my dad and my wife next year. And it's kind of like your typical, it's a pretty casual whitetail hunt, and you'll have lots of opportunities. They're guaranteed for some success. And It's just, but yeah, there's a lot of hunts where it's a lot harder. And you're right. It's like a 4-year thing to get that many opportunities. And with the gaps in between, it can be even longer, it's not easy. It's not easy. I listened to a podcast you did some time ago, probably 3 months ago, maybe it was 2 months ago. And you were just talking about success, how guys can become successful and what it takes. And basically you were just saying time in the field.
Yeah.
Like that is massive. And so we have talked about that too. A guy that can spend 15 days in a season trying to kill an elk with a bow is, and you explained it really well. I would say you're really good at breaking things down and explaining things through your YouTube channel. You do an excellent job. You bring up a lot of points that you articulate really well. Same thing with I listened to that podcast you did talking about sort of the industry drama around hunt quietly and stuff like that.
Oh, sure.
And I thought you did a really good job talking through that issue. Joe was getting some heat for the trailhead comment, and and you had some really cogent points to bring up, and I thought it was really well done. But anyway,
thanks, man.
I think time in the field is a big part of someone becoming more successful. Like you were saying, you might only have one opportunity in a 7-day window,
right,
on some hunts. So if you only go 5 days a year, it's going to be a long time before you get an opportunity, let alone capitalize on one.
Yeah. Man, the other part of that, Brian, that I think a lot of folks take for granted, and maybe you think about it, maybe you don't, is it's not just the time, dude. It's like the time. The time in between hunts.
Yeah.
Because, man, like, think about any other skill set that we learn. If we took a year off,
right,
like, you never get good at it, And I know it's searing and it's painful for people to hear that, because we all have lives, dude.
Yeah.
And it's like, and I don't want to like continue to pound on the diving thing, but it's the same thing, dude. I've been in Oregon now, away from Puerto Rico for 4 months, and I'm like, I'm never gonna get good because I'm forgetting it all. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's true, and it is a reality.
That's where things like with hunting, archery, that's something you can work on if you're into archery year round a little bit more easily. So it kind of extends your hunting enjoyment. So, and if you did go to an archery shoot or a Total Archery Challenge event or a Northwest Mountain Challenge, or you spent the weekend shooting your bow at some 3D thing, and you can incorporate that into the year, I would argue like a lot of guys are into bow hunting, and some of them get fit, get the right gear, and can hike, and actually can call and get elk in range, and cannot hit the side of a barn with their bow and put no time into it. No time.
Right. Sure.
And it's like, back to what you were saying, look, you're probably going to get one opportunity a year. Bow range, perfect scenario, everything's lining up. You get that one under pressure. If you haven't figured that, this is where I see Ryan different than everyone else that I hunt with. Ryan almost never fails to capitalize on the moment.
Yeah.
We get one moment with a rifle or a bow. It's the one chance you hunted 15 days, but that one moment, it's like he rarely messes it up.
Yeah.
Me, I'll mess up a few of them. So I need like 4 of those.
Yeah.
In a hunt. And the odds that I'm 1 for 1 is just not that good. It's getting better every year, but it's a reality of it. And a lot of that in the past, that came down to just shooting ability under pressure, because I was really good at getting myself in there, getting in range, sneaking up on it. I'm a sneaky sucker, and being patient. I'm really good at all that. Making the shot with my heart rate and my mind blacking out, that was tough. That took me a while to figure out. I needed
Sure.
more at bats. I needed more opportunities and I needed more successes. Going to places like Texas and shooting pigs and shooting some whitetails, and going to New Zealand and shooting a bunch of animals, going to Prince of Wales Island, shooting, Sitka blacktails, multiple
Yeah.
stocks with a bow in one season, where it's kind of, all of that really helped me finally get over the hump of shooting a live animal with the bow. If I had just tried to stick with once a year getting an elk tag and going out, I probably would still be missing,
Yeah. Dude, isn't that interesting, Brian, that dude, I'm like totally on board with what you just said. But isn't it interesting that the hard elk hunts are where everybody starts and they tend to stay in them? You know what I mean?
Yep.
And man, it's hard. It's such a weird, impractical way in a lot of ways to build up the skill set in my mind. I mean, I get it. I get the nostalgia and I love it. Like, dude, I mean, I'll guide 2 or 3 weeks, every single September until probably I die. Like, I like it, but there's a part of it that I'm like, man, there's a lot of other hunts that you could do that might help you, on this journey,
I have a theory though. Like, first of all, archery is like in our DNA, I think.
Yeah.
It's like we're cavemen. Like there's something about it that we are drawn to.
Oh yeah.
Shooting an arrow is just like something.
Yeah.
special.
My little boy's getting into it, so I can,
Yeah.
for sure.
The weather. It's not that hard, the weather's pretty decent.
Yeah.
Bulls are screaming. That's exciting. You're talking to them, even if you're not very good at it. They're there even when you can't see them because you can hear them.
Right.
And then every now and then just some magic happens and one walks right in front of you and you're like, your heart's doing this. So all these things combine to make it an alluring hunt to go on.
Sure.
Here's what I think though. Tell me what you think about this. I think you see tons of guys do it every year and never shoot an animal. They have a lot of stories about how close they came every single year.
Yeah.
And Clay, I think a lot of it is because they have set the goal in their mind, whether it's conscious or not, to get a shot at an elk. That's their goal. Their goal isn't actually to kill the elk. The goal is to get the shot. And then they come back and they go, dude, I got the shot. I mean, he came out and I came full draw and I got the shot, but I didn't work out. They feel like they've really accomplished something. Like they got it done when they get the shot every year. It's like they don't set that expectation to actually kill it. Like it's like in their mind, they're so content with that one stage of it, and it satisfies them, fulfills them in a big way, and they don't get past that point.
It's almost like a lack of psychological follow through.
Exactly. Which I think is the actual issue with the shooting as well.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. The reason that you don't make the shot usually is it's a psychological follow through at the very last piece of that stage of shooting at the live animal. There's a breakdown, and it's the same thing. There's like a breakdown in the goal. And so you'll see guys, a bull will be coming in, deer, elk, whatever it is, an animal coming in to range. And it's 40 yards quartering two. And they're like, okay, I think I can slip it right here. And there's like this, it's a sharp quartering, and it's like, it's not a good shot. But they're like, it's now or never. But it's not.
Right.
That bull probably, if you just sit still, come to 20 yards. Sure. Right? Yeah. But they never found out because they let her rip.
Yeah.
Like when the moment came, because their goal was to get the shot.
Yeah.
Not to actually put the arrow where it's supposed to be.
Right.
Like they're so anxious to get the shot. And if you think about it from the perspective of, no, the goal is for this thing to be dead.
Yeah.
If that's your goal, the goal is it to be dead. And you're thinking in those terms, it's got to die. It's got to die. It's got to die. It's not about, oh, there he is. I got my shot. I got a shot. I have a wing and a prayer. It's here. I finally can let one loose. If that's your goal, it's that you're going to end with that result versus no, it's got to die. You go, wait, that shot probably won't end in the death result that I'm looking for. Hold longer, wait just a little bit more. And then that animal turns, and then you're like, okay, I'm feeling good. I'm not shaking too much. The goal is death. The goal is death.
Yeah.
You make a different set of choices when you set the goal for the actual dead elk versus the shot opportunity.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
No, I do know what you mean. And it's interesting how you put it. So I've ran into this probably like dozens of times, Brian, and I guess I'll depict it by like a story, I suppose, but I've seen it with archers and rifle hunters I've guided. And so my go-to strategy, and I've always, tried to get all my guides to do it too, is if I don't see the archery shot, or if I'm not able to call the rifle shot, always the first thing I do is I ask the hunter, how did it feel? Just from like a tactical, informational standpoint, it gives me some important information. And I cannot tell you how many guys will the first thing they'll say is, I wish I wouldn't have shot. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what an irrational thing to have occurred. You know what I mean? Like, you wish you would not have shot. And it is in when I talk to guys about that, because of course, like particularly like the first few times I experienced this, like my reaction is like, what the F? You know what I mean? Like, why? Like, we've been up here we've been up here for 6 days trying to find these things. We finally got here, and like, you shot when you felt like you shouldn't have. Like, what a weird thing to do. But it's like this. I think you're right, man. I haven't thought about it in this context. I always thought it was just the pain of the anxiety. You know what I mean? Like, the pain of the anxiety, the stress, the heart thumping, all of that is so intense that their body just wants it over with.
I agree with that. I think that's a component for sure.
Right. But maybe they're willing to accept being over with it early because they in their mind, they think, okay, this is like mission accomplished. I got here. Boom. It's over. Whatever.
I agree. Because I think that the pain of not actually killing it, because if that's the goal, dead elk, actual death is what matters, not getting a shot. Like, if they're thinking about that, then the pain of this moment is less painful than
going,
than just letting her rip and then being regretful later. And so when they think about it in terms of failing the real goal, I think it helps my mind stay more focused on making the better choice. Joel Turner told me years ago, he's like, Brian, most guys shoot 1 second to 2 seconds too soon.
Yeah.
If they had just, like, if every time I'm about to shoot, I'm like, okay, 1,000, 1,000. And again, now I'm going to shoot. Like, every time I feel like now's the moment. I often nowadays, because of what Joel told me, hold on for just a second longer than what I felt like I should hold on for. And because it's deep in my mind, like, most guys go too soon. They shoot too soon. They jump they pull the trigger just, their pin's floating and the anxiety hits them and they just goes out, And if you can hold on to that just a little bit longer, a little bit sooner, a little bit longer, you end up with a much better result. So it's a tough thing. Like, the anxiety that comes from that, I do, but I'm surprised at how many buddies I've observed over the years that are like, dude, this hunt was epic. The bull came out. I got a shot. It's like, well, who cares? You didn't hit it. Like, and they're so fine with that. And they tell their buddies, and it's a story to tell, and they feel so accomplished. And next time I'll get him next. And it's like, wow, that surprises me, because you didn't actually get the animal in the end. And
do you think there's I'm just curious if you've thought about this, Brian. Do you think there's a difference between guys that like let's take Texans as an example. A Texan who's archery hunting all the time, it's not a big deal for a Texan to kill 10, 15 animals a year, right? Do you feel like a guy like that is less likely to do that, or do you not notice a difference?
Yes, I think they're less likely to do that. I think people who have killed a lot with their bows and rifles, They done it. Their mind is in a different category. It's like, well, I've done it. I know it can be done. I've seen it done, and this is how I've done it. Here's what I think happens. Ranello will talk about this on his podcast for years. He's like, dang it, when I lust after the animal, when it's the biggest buck ever, when it's the animal I covet the most in my life.
Yeah.
That's when I can't make a basic shot.
Yeah.
So your nerves are in direct correlation to how badly you want this outcome to turn out.
Yeah.
Right. 400-inch bull elk right there. You've got him, and you want this thing so badly that you miss a 30-yard shot. When it's a spike that comes out and you're like, I guess it's meat for the freezer. You let her fling. You don't make a mistake.
Yeah.
So the anxiety is in direct relation to how badly you want it.
Yeah.
So that's the emotion that you need to figure out how to control. So even though a guy has killed 30, 40 whitetails with his bow.
Yeah.
When he steps out to get the animal of his dreams, some giant mule deer, let's say, on some hunt he's saved up for, or elk, let's say. Elk's a better example. A guy hunts a lot of whitetails and he dreams of coming out west to hunt elk.
Yeah.
He finally has this 330 bull right in front of him. Everything's coming together, but he wants it so badly that everything goes out the window.
Yeah, it takes control. Yep.
Takes control.
Yeah.
So for me, I just worked on a controlled shot process like Joel teaches, and I'm focused on the process. I come to full draw. I don't punch a trigger.
Yeah.
I do a surprise release, and every shot I shoot 365 is like that. Just let the pin float, pull through, and the shot breaks and it goes. And what that has done for me is I just miss small. The pin's always doing this. By about the time it's coming off, it's coming right back on faster than my conscious mind can dictate. And I've just learned to accept that whole thing bouncing around and doing its thing. And I just let the shot kind of go off. And because I'm focused on the process, I don't black out. I don't make those big mistakes. I'm not punching it at just the pin's there, go.
Sure.
I'm not doing that. And that has completely changed, because your mind, I think, does what you're telling it to do in the moment. Yeah. So, it's like hold, aim. Okay. Pick your spot. Okay. Hold it right there. Okay. You're steady. Okay. Now, okay, here I go. Start to squeeze. Hold it there, Brian. Squeeze. And I'm pulling on that release and it's floating and then the shot goes off. Well, I was shaking like a leaf. That doesn't go away. I still shake like this. Like, I'm all over. But even though I'm all over and that pin is doing this, it's missing small. It's still always in the kill zone.
Sure.
Even though it's shaking like a leaf, it never deviates so far out of the kill zone until I go, now punch. Then I have like real bad misses.
Yeah. No, that whole concept, and I haven't gone through like all of Joel's stuff, but I notice it a lot because this longbow shooting is fairly new to me.
Yeah.
And I have a clicker on my longbow, and man, like it's the same deal. Like just, going to the point and then just thinking about that back pressure until that, and then that just going through that click. It's just the process of doing that. It's just like, it doesn't, like you say, it doesn't make you more calm, but it for sure makes you way more accurate and like just more consistent, just because you're set on the price. It's kind of an amazing psychological thing.
It is. This is why I think, though, it's all so fascinating. And I don't know, on the archery scene, there's just something about getting good with a bow and arrow, seeing your arrow hit the target in the center.
Oh yeah.
Over and over and over again, when you're getting it dialed and figured out and you're finally mastering a skill set like that. It's just like, it's hard to find things I think more rewarding than that.
Yeah.
Imagine shooting a basketball and every time you shoot it just lands in the bucket. You're just like, wow. There's something that feels so.
Yeah, it's like a primitive thing. I know what you're talking about. Yeah. It's like for sure just intrinsic to us, like the enjoyment out of such a like mundane
basic
thing. Yeah. It's kind of interesting because it's got to be ingrained in us. Have you tried much traditional stuff?
When I was a kid, my parents, I had all recurves and all that kind of stuff. And I hunted with all the legal poundage and stuff with just a recurve bow until I was 15. And then my dad got me a compound.
Yeah.
And so I killed a couple animals with just a recurve. And back then, I didn't have any. I just aimed at the target 20 yards and it was all instinctive because I walked around the woods and I shot everything I could shoot. Rabbits, birds, like sticks, rocks. Like we shot each other, my cousin and I. It was not a good thing, but it's just like, and so it got really comfortable and I loved doing it. And I did it for probably since like age 10 to 15.
Yeah.
And I did some tournaments at that time. And then when I got a compound, it was just different, but it was still fingers. Back then, the compounds had fingers.
Yeah.
And I would shoot fingers with tabs, even with the compound. And then it wasn't until I didn't get a release for a compound until I was in my 20s.
Okay.
And and then at first I didn't like it because I was so used to my finger tabs and shooting with it.
Sure.
Shooting that way and looking down the arrow, and it just felt so normal. I hated the release, hated it.
Yeah.
But then I was like, it's undeniable that the release is accurate.
Oh,
it's just so much more accurate.
Yeah.
And then I went through so then I haven't touched a recurve in years, and then a couple guys sent me some.
Oh, okay.
That were listeners, and I interviewed South Cox quite a bit and was down at Stalker and helped watch them build some bows. And so I got some and I'm shooting 20, 30 yards and I enjoyed it. I haven't gone and hunting with one, mostly just because it's hard enough with a compound to get the animal I want. Yeah. So if I shoot a recurve, it's for fun and it takes time. I have to really want it. And I'm not as interested in the Linda My Psyche. Same with Lampers. He's kind of built the same way. I'm not as interested in the weapon I use as I am the unicorn I'm after.
Yeah, I get it.
Like I don't care to shoot. I'm much more interested in finding a massive deer and getting it than I am in doing it with a certain weapon.
Yeah. No,
but some guys love that's like, if it can be done with a recurve, that is the satisfying part.
Yeah.
I don't know that the ultimate is the biggest animal possible with the recurve.
Yeah.
That's my thing. But dude, I can't even get it done with the compound. So it's like, do I want to add another level of complexity to it? No.
Yeah.
When I become like Ryan, maybe then I'll like, when I'm much more consistent and I've mastered the compound. But I feel like what I'm trying to accomplish is hard enough, let alone to add another layer.
Yeah. Dude, I mean, I have this buddy from Colorado and he's like no social media presence or whatever. His name is his name's Mark Turner. He's been a guide there forever. And dude, like he's taken me in his house and he's killed like, what is it, like the North American 29
Slam or something? Yeah.
What like all the species? Like he's killed almost all of them with the exception of the ones that are like stone sheep he hasn't killed, I think. And maybe polar bear. I don't know. But anyways, like he walks me through his house. Great guy, he's killed all of them with longbows he's made. And I think to myself, like, that is insane. Like the level, I mean, if he would have done it with a rifle, I would be like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like this is some serious adventures.
Now, I'm going to interrupt you here because I always question some of this because Lampers and I had this conversation this morning, actually.
Yeah.
We're talking about it today because I killed some bears with my bow this spring.
Yeah.
But it was a pretty it was in Alberta. It was stacked.
Yeah.
It was like some of it was baited. It was like these bears are coming in and out of this spot. You can sneak in. This was not tough.
It was
really
pretty
wasn't.
easy. Yeah. Yep.
And then, but the number of people who are like badass, nice job, done it with a bow.
Yeah.
And I killed some bears in BC a couple of weeks earlier where the mountain goats roam with a rifle. 1,000% more rugged, 1,000% harder, 1,000%, all these things. And we had this conversation about it because I feel like often archery hunts are far overrated and a lot of rifle hunts are far underrated.
Yeah.
And many of the successes I see with bows, some guys that just really kill a lot, I'm like, well, that hunt is pretty easy.
Yeah.
You got the finances, you hunted elk in this particular situation. I went to Mexico and I had this ambitious idea that I'm going to shoot a Coues deer with my bow. And Ryan mocked me relentlessly 2 months leading up to it.
Yeah.
He's like, dude, this is just not a bow hunt. It's just not a bow hunt. It's just not. I'm like, what does that even mean, Ryan? Shut up. I'm going to bow hunt.
Yeah.
It's not a bow hunt, Clay. Like it was like you could find one deer. Like you see the one, you better shoot the one because there's more lions than anything. And so it's like, you know what I mean? Like I want to put these accomplishments in perspective, sometimes because like with the recurve, I'm excited that a guy did it because that's what he wanted to do. I also am like, I kind of want to understand what sort of hunts. Was this like Deseret did it with a recurve? Or was this like over the counter Colorado did it with a recurve? Like those are it matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when you're talking about admiring the act, I think there's lots of levels to it.
No, so in that specific case, I think I like knowing him pretty well. Some of those hunts are like what you're talking about. Like they're not that difficult, and some of them are for sure crazy difficult. But like the broader concept is so interesting.
It's still an accomplishment to commit to it with a recurve.
Yeah. Or in this case, longbow actually.
Longbow.
But either way, like the bigger concept you talk about is fascinating to me because I think like you probably don't even realize it, Brian, but you have if you do it enough and you do enough of different types of hunting, you actually end up with like a sixth sense. Like when I see an Instagram picture or, a video or whatever, I know with fairly good accuracy how hard that hunt actually was.
Right.
The reality is, I think 90% of people consuming the media just don't have that. But I can, to be honest with you, dude, like I can see a big bull and I can tell you just genetically if it was off a high fence or not. You know what I mean? Like I've guided on big high fences and stuff. So it's like I've been around guys that raise bulls and stuff, and I've done a ton of public land hunting. Like I can look at them and pretty much know. You know what I mean? And I'm not casting judgment. That doesn't, to me personally, doesn't matter. But it does. It's amazing how the actual skill involved is so much different. Because a guy, I know a guy can have a little 4x2 raghorn elk, and I recognize the mountain behind him, and I'm like, that was a hell of a hunt.
Exactly. I can look at a baited whitetail hunt, which is what a food plot is, on a beautiful piece of property that is privately owned. And, it's just they're in like a redneck blind where the doors close and the scent can't even escape. And they open it and they shoot the deer. And this video's got 200,000 views in 3 days. And I'm like, and people love it. And I'm like, dude, just the food plot, the land, the thing, like this is a $100,000 investment here. And it's like, why is it so lapped up? Why does the public just consume and hyper focus on that and get excited about it, when you have another guy that just goes out and shoots a whitetail in Ohio, on public land and nobody watches it, and it wasn't a very big deer. It's like, man, of the accomplishments, they're not even in the same ballpark.
No,
not even close.
Yeah.
I guess in some ways, the accomplishment is with the more high dollar version. It's sort of like, I see it like sheep hunting. A sheep hunt isn't just the sheep. It's the status, wealth, connections it takes to even afford the sheep.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like in those circles, they don't really care. In fact, the more expensive the sheep hunt goes into, more appreciated it is by the sheep, by the elite sheep community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because it's not just about the sheep, it's about the elite status to afford one,
Yeah.
Well,
dude, I mean, it's funny you say that. I was having this conversation with a guy who worked for me for years yesterday, Brian, and it's like, I'll be honest, like a dirty secret of sheep hunting in Colorado, and there's some variation between the different units and everything else. I don't know how many I've guided, maybe, I don't know, 15, somewhere in that realm or whatever. But as my outfitting business grew, I quit doing archery. I did much less archery elk guiding, and I did more and more sheep guiding, and I would stuff my schedule with them. And it was amazing to me because I almost felt like this immediate like jump in status as a hunter. Right. And I'm like, that's really weird because I'm sitting here talking to my guides and I'm saying, guys, I got to have enough communication so I can run this business. I got to get done quickly. And dude, most of those units, when I took a guy sheep hunting, we were killing one in 2-3 days, but I couldn't be up in the San Juans, the flat tops in some wilderness area, grinding out an 8-day elk hunt away from my communication. Cause it was a way harder hunt, like not even in the same realm. Yep. And I thought, I was like, oh, it's so counterintuitive. Like I've literally made a business decision to allocate my guiding to these hunts because they're easier by every metric.
I know.
You know what I mean? And it's just like ironic. And it's so funny because my, this Jimmy I was talking to yesterday, he like brought it up to me. He's like, it's so funny, dude. Like you post a picture of you with rams up and they go berserk. And remember how we used to laugh about how Cliff was always taking the easy hunts because he had other crap to do. You know what I mean? It's just fun. It's a really odd dynamic.
It is. Like I took Pedro on a mountain bear hunt, Pedro and Puero. Yeah. And he shot a black bear up there, and he's like, we were up in rugged places like where the goats are. And we backpacked all 10 days, everything on your back. And he had never done more than like 3 days of backpacking in his life. And so he never carried his camp with him. It was base camp. And then he spiked out, So what we did was,
he has awesome videos.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so this is a man who's hunted, everywhere, as much as anyone.
Yeah.
And all over the world. And yet hadn't done carry your camp on your backpack. Ever.
Yep.
When he got done with that hunt, he got that bear and he was like, this is one of the most rugged, difficult.
Sure.
I've been to Mongolia, Tajikistan, Pakistan. I've been in some of the nastiest mountains in the world hunting all these different animals. And these bears, this hunt was every bit as like of an accomplishment and of an adventure of anything I've ever done. And it's like, that's where quality of adventure, cost, they don't necessarily go hand in hand.
No, yeah.
And accomplishment also is what the world perceives as an accomplishment and what I think is a real accomplishment don't always coincide because the world is uninformed.
Yeah, but isn't that such an uncomfortable like thing to think about? At least I don't want to project it on you, Brian, but for me personally, there's things that I'm like, man, like I'd like to go. Dude, like right now, Brian, I would love to take this longbow that I was talking about, and I would love to just go out and film, just go to Texas and like like northern Texas or West Texas, like some
Yeah.
cap rock, and just walk around and shoot pigs with this
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
To me, it'd be like such an adventure. It'd be hard for me. Like all this stuff, it's something I'm learning, all of that, and nobody would watch it. You know what I mean?
I know. And that's where Ryan and I have worked really hard. We've tried to like change it up so we could,
You can do that. Yeah.
try to make rifle hunting cool again, and some of these other hunts, pig hunting with the longbow, cool again.
But you tell you're a good storyteller, so it's easy, or not easy, I'm sure, but you can do that.
I do want to change those perceptions. I want people to see that the hunt is much more than just the weapon used. There's so much adventure to be had, and sometimes you need a bow for a certain hunt to be worth your time. Right?
Yeah, sure.
Like it's like if it was a rifle hunt, this would be so boring. I went on a BC black bear hunt. I'm like, well, crap, I'd tag out in the first hour. There's 25 bears over here. The whole point of it being like exciting and tough was the fact that you introduced the bow. And then there's hunts where it's like you could hunt with a bow 5 years and you're never going to get something in this type of terrain this time of year. The rifle, it's hard enough with just the rifle.
Yeah, sure.
And I want people to grasp all of that when they watch a film. And
why is that though? Do you feel like you're doing God's work, Brian, by just like informing people, or is it that you like want people to take take on those type of adventures?
Well, I feel like I think truth matters.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I think that being informed, fully informed, like about reality matters. And so, and back to like Steve Jobs would say, people don't know what they want until you tell them. I don't think people know that they want an adventure like what we're doing until they see it, and now they get it. And if I do my job right, like we did a wolf hunt up north, Ryan and I, I could do all kinds of stuff to explain why wolf hunting's,
crazy hard.
Well, and why it's like meaningful to do.
Yeah.
Or justifiable.
Oh yeah, I got you. Mm-hmm.
I could weave it all into the film, and wolves kill this many a year, and you got to hunt them for this reason. You need to try, but it's like, if I just bring you on the hunt and I do my job right, and you feel like you're right there with me, and you see how they behave and the interactions, and then us pick it up, and just the raw authenticity of what we do. And you see those teeth, just like I saw those teeth, and you see those paws, and you see that animal on the ground, and then we pick it up, and I'm listening in awe of it. I don't have to explain why they're hunted.
Right. Sure.
You feel it in your bones. You feel it in your DNA.
Right.
And I think that that's where a lot of guys that film hunts they're not communicating to people. They're using words to justify all hunts. We eat the meat and we do this and we do. I honestly, I don't think that people really need to hear any of that.
Yeah,
they just need to be there with you and feel like what it's like right as a bug on, a fly on your shoulder, or whatever. I watched the Meat Eater episode with Clay Newcomb trapping those wolves. He didn't go into a lot of detail on that episode on why. He just said, I believe that wolves make sense. He didn't explain why, and he just did it. And there's something about that messaging that I feel is more authentic and touches you more. It's like than it is to like build some show that deeply explains statistically how many. I think that stuff's useful, and I think it's. But what I'm trying to say is, in the movie and the film medium, I want to show, not tell. I want you to feel it, but not know why you feel that it feels right.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, which makes your job a lot harder. You know what I mean? At least from my perspective.
I think you have to have the sound and the feels and the audio like perfect. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, Clay, I've kept you a long time. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. We need to do it again soon because I have so many more conversations I'd love to have. So if you're willing to, I'd love to get
Yeah,
you
of course, man. I would love to. You know what? I have to point this out because it's hilarious, Brian. I brought up Clay Hayes, and now like the last 2 times you haven't called me Cliff, you've called me Clay.
Did I?
Yeah.
Dude.
just to bust your balls a little bit. And it was like right when I brought up Clay, you
I blame you for that. I blame you for that.
It's funny, dude, because lots of guys do it, and I think it's because I think me and Clay have similar like length of beard and stuff. So I had to bust your balls about it once. Oh, that's funny, dude.
My longtime friend the other day, I did a sheep. He shot a desert sheep with his bow.
Yeah,
and twice in the video in the subtitles, I put Jake.
Yeah,
and his name's Jay. I've known Jay for years, and I call him Jay. Why did I type Jake? You know, dude.
No, it's funny,
I don't know.
Man.
But these things happen. It's weird.
You know, absolutely. But yeah, of course, dude. I love talking to you, and it's interesting, dude. We didn't talk half the podcast. We didn't talk about hunting. I hope your listeners still got some value out of it, man.
That's why I say we got to get back on it and talk about some real tactics in hunting and stuff like that. But I think my audience is used to. I honestly want to have conversations that that mean something to me, that where I can, really get to know someone. And then after that, I like to do more shows once I feel like I've known someone a little bit more. It makes for more meaningful conversation. But yeah, let's do it again sometime soon. Thanks, brother, for coming on. Folks, check out Cliff Gray. Go to his YouTube channel. It's awesome. And we'll
awesome, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me, Brian. I enjoyed it, dude.
Yeah, you bet, brother. All right, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.